Well, thanks very much for coming. Really appreciate you attending, and for anyone who's watching on live stream as well, thank you very much for logging on to watch us. So my name's Tom Collier. I'm a consultant in anaesthetics and intensive care here in Harrogate, and this is Emma Radcliffe, I don't know if you can see as well, who's the General Manager for Cancer Services at the moment, and sadly he's not going to be with us for much longer. But and so we're just going to spend the next sort of half an hour talking about the Active Against Cancer service. So we're going to break it down into some of the benefits of exercise that you may or may not know about, how the model runs, and some of our service evaluation. So just to start, and this is going to come to the guys in the room. So this is a wild savanna elephant. The male bull is the largest land animal on Earth, can reach up to about 6 tons. And can you give me an estimate of its average life expectancy of a wild savanna elephant? How long do you think it might live? In between, so around 60 years is probably sort of life expectancy of this elephant. Now it walks on average somewhere between about 3 and 7 miles a day on average, but in the migratory season it walks up to 16 miles a day. So across its lifespan, it walks approximately 150,000 miles, which is about 3 times around the circumference of the Earth to its lifespan. And this is a domestic elephant, so like a zoo elephant, which is effectively for its entire lifetime sedentary. And do you know what its average life expectancy is? Sadly, it's not even 30. They're lucky if they make 20 years. So it's dramatically shorter, and that's despite having access to nutrition and veterinary care. And that's something that's been known and noticed for a long time. So this is back in sort of 1949, so a year after the NHS was formed. An academic called Alan Morris noted that in London, within bus drivers and bus conductors, there was a significant difference in cardiovascular risk and death. And the bus drivers had a much higher risk of mortality and cardiovascular disease than conductors. And even back in 1949, he made the connection that the difference for them, they have the same socioeconomic background, they're living in the same areas, they weren't suffering from obesity because it's post-war Britain, it was not related to diet. The difference was that one of them spent all day sitting and the other one spent all day going up and down the stairs in the bus. And that affected their life expectancy. And we now know, and this is a fact, that inactivity, so sedentary lifestyle, is the 4th leading cause of death globally. And you can actually see that represented. There aren't many good longitudinal studies, but actually this is a study conducted in Scandinavia looking at men over the age of 50, and it tracked them longitudinally. So it wasn't an observational study, it followed them through their lifespan. And it looked at the difference between those who are physically active and less physically active. And this is a cumulative mortality. So this is your increasing chance of death over time. And as you can see, those who are physically active, increasingly less likely to die than those who are inactive. And in fact, in this study, if you maintained your physical activity, you're likely to live around 8 years longer than those who are inactive. And really importantly, this trajectory does change. So if you are inactive and become active, you remodel. So you can change your life expectancy in there. And the same, sadly, as well, that if you go from being active to inactive, your risks start to go back up again. They go up slowly. So again, this gives us an indication of the impact of lifestyle. But so that sort of a connection between exercise and mortality was known, but what wasn't known was necessarily why that is. More recently, we're starting to see the connection between muscle itself, actual muscle mass, muscle strength, and outcome. And this is a study from the American Association of Cardiology. But actually, it shows you the 2 top lines are patients with higher muscle mass, and one is with obese, and one's not obese. And then low muscle mass with normal body mass and obese. And you can see that the muscle itself is protective. it's not the influence of weight so much, which again goes something to when you hear people saying about the risks of dieting and the lack of connection between necessarily dieting and outcomes. And that is partly why that any form of diet without physical activity and muscle strengthening exercises is far less likely to have any impact on actually your health longer term. And that is because muscle does not just keep you standing upright. Muscle does so much more, and it's an absolutely fascinating part of like what we're coming to understand about how muscle works. That it is a really potent exocrine hormonal organ, and it secretes hormones. And to give you just one example of the multiple, that if you take adults over the age of 50 and you exercise them and MRI their brains over a course of about sort of 3 to 6 months, you can start to see changes in the size of parts of their brain as they exercise with no other intervention. The brain actually grows from exercising. And again, that's because the muscle is secreting hormones that actually stimulate brain growth, and that's associated with executive function, cognitive function. So they start to perform like at a cognitive level better. So it's incredibly powerful. It's linked to lots of the other body systems there. But also what we're going to see with time is that your muscle mass up to the age of 30 builds, and then it just gradually starts to deteriorate if you don't do anything, which is why there's importance that you have to work to maintain muscle mass through aging. And also you can see why high performance athletes generally historically haven't performed much beyond 30, because they are no longer genetically programmed to be laying down more muscle, and actually their performance tails off unless you do something about it. But there is a substantial decline beyond the age of 50. And we know as humans, activity has been genetically engineered out of our lifestyle. And you have to rethink about putting activity, exercise back into our lifestyle again. This is a professor of human performance called Norman Lazarus, and he talks a lot about health span as opposed to lifespan, the ability to live well into older age rather than live long. You need to live well with it. And he's nearly 90. He cycles about 100 miles a week, but he's often quoted as saying that he's much fitter now than he was when he was 50, when he didn't do any form of activity. So he's a fascinating individual, but he introduces this idea of living well as we get older. And when it comes to healthcare, that's absolutely vital. And we can see the link between exercise and chronic disease repeatedly. And just to give you one sort of like example of its importance, if you were to group together all the pharmacological interventions that you can for heart disease, so statins, aspirin, ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, etc., you put them all together, you would be lucky to see a 40% risk reduction from all of those. And that is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And you can see that just by taking patients and exercising them. But it's the link, particularly with cancer and with Active Against Cancer, where we're fascinated. So it's just a last couple of sort of interesting points, that this link between being fit and your risk reduction from cancer is known. And that is the link between, again, muscle exercise and one, the mitochondria, and two, which I'll come to, stem cells, which are regenerative. And every cell in the body has mitochondria in it, which is like the battery of the cell, apart from red blood cells. But every other cell in the body has this battery in it, and it is designed to produce these highly explosive ATP, which is the energy to do everything within your body. And you are designed, like any battery, to discharge that battery. You need to use that up. And these are highly reactive oxidative molecules that, if they're not used, they start to damage the cell itself, is one connection. And that includes the DNA of cells. And two, you need fresh functioning mitochondria, and exercise is directly linked to the replacement and upscaling of fresh mitochondria. So you get better mitochondrial integrity if you regularly exercise. And if you measure stem cells, within 10 minutes of exercising, you get a release of stem cells into the circulation. So again, that makes sense. If you were about to go into battle or fight or flight, run for your life, you were likely to suffer tissue damage. You needed to be able to repair it from an evolutionary point of view. And exercise helps cellular repair. And in fact, that's how you get fitter. And to give you one more example, if you take cancerous cells and you inject them into healthy mice, and then you divide them into those which are kept sedentary and those which are given regular exercise, you are more likely to have metastatic spread in those that are sedentary than those are active. So actually, just by being these mice that are active get far less seeding of their cancer than those that are sedentary. And so we know that there is a role for exercise through every stage of a cancer journey. And I guess Active Against Cancer was designed really so that if this is a quote from a leader in this area, that if exercise was a pill, it'd be prescribed to every cancer patient. So that's what we've tried to do with Active Against Cancer. We've tried to take what we know in sort of like the exercise science world and say, well, can we add this into the cancer pathway for our patients? And we've just had our 4th birthday now. So July 2019, Active Against Cancer launched. This is the day we launched. And for the last 4 years, we've been growing since then. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of how the service functions. And then Emma's going to talk about some of our successes. So the principles of the Active Against Cancer service that we wanted to work to is that it was community-based. We don't want patients to feel like patients when they're with us. We want them to feel like they're going to a gym. And that social support and social prescribing was going to be key into that. And it had to be inclusive and fun. Any form of activity that you don't choose to do has a very, very short-term impact. You have to want to repeatedly go and not really be seeing it that is part of your prescription. We aim that all patients at the point of their diagnosis have at least a consideration about the role for activity, health and well-being through their journey, and that a diagnosis is made. And we try, if we can, to contact the patients within 2 days to offer them a one-on-one assessment where they'll be seen by an exercise specialist stroke physiotherapist together and prescribed an individualized exercise program. And broadly for patients, these can be divided into 3 main categories: preparation for your treatment, whether that be surgery or chemotherapy or radiotherapy, the ability to exercise through a treatment. So if you're going through chemotherapy and radiotherapy, have classes, and then getting patients back to their pre-existing fitness, or if not ideally fitter state as soon as possible, so they can re-engage in society and really feel like the benefit of what we've offered. And that's our game there, that we get a lifelong activity for patients and they can gain from that. So just some examples of the classes we do, and there's different range of classes at different levels. From the classes can be sitting in the most deconditioned patients through to high interval classes, but they're all designed to be fun, engaging, hip based. There may be yoga, Pilates, and so on. We also have a wellbeing program that we run alongside, and one of the 3 pillars of this sort of program is not just the activity, but the psychological support and the dietetic support, and then the other wellbeing supports that are offered through the Sir Robert Ogden Macmillan Centre, so financial support and complementary therapies. And then we are also available for patients who need it to look at more specific areas, such as you can see scar therapy here or lymphedema. So idea of picking up complications from cancer treatment itself and making referrals. We don't just feel ourselves that the service is running well. We have been lucky enough to be the winners of the North East Excellence in Healthcare Award at a parliamentary level. And in fact, we were invited down to Westminster during COVID and came second to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine team at a national level. So this came second throughout the whole country for its sort of innovative patient design. So I'm going to hand over to Emma now, who's going to talk about some of our service outcomes. Yes.
Thanks, Tom. And as Tom said, I'm just going to spend the rest of this talk talking a little bit about service outcomes. So although we feel the service is doing really well, we've obviously tried to kind of objectively measure that in ways that we can demonstrate for other people. So before I start, I just want to say that a lot of this work was done by South Central and West Commissioning Support Unit. So just a thank you to them for providing a lot of this data, which I'll talk through. And Tom's obviously described the Active Against Cancer pathway, which is quite broad. And for a lot of this evaluation, we've focused specifically on the prehab element of the service. So getting people prepared and ready for their treatment. So that's some of the data I'm going to talk you through just now. So starting with some of our service delivery metrics, Tom mentioned we've been open for 4 years. In that time, we've had about 2,500 referrals into the service, so it's fairly large scale. And this graph you can see here just shows our referrals since the beginning of 2021. So each quarter, we see about 150 referrals. That's about 55 a month. And you can see from the dotted line that that trend is just going upwards. So as time goes by, we get more and more referrals, which is brilliant. For 77% of patients, we're getting those referrals around the point of diagnosis. So they are coming to us for prehab and to prepare for treatment, which is exactly what we wanted. We measure the gender split of patients, which is fairly equal, maybe a slight bias towards men in our service. And we also measure age at referral, and we have a huge age range. So our youngest patients are in their 20s, our eldest are in their 90s, so a huge range there. But predominantly, we're supporting patients between sort of the mid-50s to around 80 years of age. Obviously, once they're with us, we're really interested in getting them exercising and exercising regularly. So these graphs show the amount of exercise that we're delivering. So on the left, this is the number of exercise class attendances we see. And at the moment, we're seeing around 1,000 a month. So that's about 250 a week and about 50 a day. So really quite large scale. And we can split that down. So the graph on the right just shows which classes those patients are coming to, so we can see what's popular and kind of use that to inform our timetable and kind of where we're using our staff time. So lots of people coming and doing lots of exercise. But of course, off the back of what Tom's talked about, what we're really interested in is the impact of that. What does that do for our patients? So throughout the time people are with us, they come for regular assessments. And during that assessment, we measure certain objective measures. And we also have some questionnaires where patients self-report things like fatigue, for example, and we monitor that through their time in the service. We've got a lot of data, so I've just picked out some of the kind of key bits to show you today. So this first slide is focusing on lung cancer patients. And the reason I've chosen lung cancer patients is because GERFT selected Active Against Cancer as a kind of good practice showcase specifically for prehabilitating lung cancer patients. So this first graph on the right is looking at aerobic capacity, so kind of aerobic fitness, cardiovascular fitness. And the 3 measures we've taken, the first is at baseline, so what this cohort of patients' aerobic fitness was when they were referred to us. And the second measure you can see is after their prehab. So we've drastically improved their aerobic fitness by exercising with us during prehab. And then to the next measure, their aerobic capacity actually drops. But the point I want to make there is that final measure is after treatment. And for these patients, that is mostly thoracic surgery at Leeds for the removal of lung cancer. So we would completely expect that their aerobic capacity drops. But the point I want to really make here is the aerobic capacity of these patients after having thoracic surgery is still higher than it was at the point they were referred into our service originally. which is really quite phenomenal, and I think slightly, exactly what we were hoping to see. We measure other things, we measure strength, we measure fatigue, and no matter kind of what metric we use, we see that same trend or same pattern for these outcome measures for our patients. Another cohort of patients that's really interesting to look at is colorectal. So colorectal cancer surgery is probably the most invasive type of surgery that's done at Harrogate. So this is a really interesting cohort to look at. And again, we measure them at baseline, before treatment and after treatment. And the graph for our colorectal patients looks slightly different. And I think probably one of the primary driving factors for that is they're starting in a much less deconditioned point than our lung cancer patients are in this cohort, at least. But you can see here still, when they're with us during prehab, they're improving. Not quite so much, but they are improving. But the big difference with colorectal is we can get them to continue improving through treatment, through neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and then beyond surgery. So that's really positive outcomes. So we've got patients, we've got fitter patients, we've got stronger patients, we've got less fatigued patients. What does that mean for the healthcare system? So for these patients, we've looked at lots of different metrics, and what we've done is compared individuals who've gone through prehabilitation at Active Against Cancer to a control cohort who were referred for prehab but didn't take up that offer, so haven't had the exercise intervention. And we've looked at lots of metrics, so non-elective readmissions to hospital after treatment. We've looked at the number of readmissions, and we've looked at bed days, so length of stay of those readmissions. And what this table basically shows is that for everything we looked at, there is either no difference or a significant reduction in the amount of time these patients are accessing our hospital services if they've been through prehabilitation, which far exceeds, I think, what we'd hope to see. So with all of these metrics, you can tie financial tariffs to them, and you can use that to do cost benefit analysis. So we know that the annual cost of running the Active Against Cancer prehab model is £32,000 a year, which, relatively speaking, for an NHS service is pennies. It's literally nothing. And we know that from the data we've gathered in this evaluation, the annual savings of running this prehab model are £39,000 a year, which equates to a saving of roughly £450 per person we put through the programme. So not only does this prehab model pay for itself, but it also equates to an annual saving of around £7,000 a year, which is absolutely fantastic if you're trying to encourage other healthcare providers to establish services like that. But what arguably is probably the most important thing in a service evaluation is, what do the patients make of the service? So we get huge amounts of positive feedback, and I just wanted to share quickly a few that we get. So we know that patients feel they get mental and emotional support from the service. We know that it makes them feel anything is possible. We know that they're able to generate new sets of forever friends. And actually what you see here is a picture of a formal volunteer group called the Friends of Active Against Cancer, who have been through the service but have gone on to continue and support us. And they do lots and lots of fantastic work, such as arrange social events, get people together, encourage lifelong activity, get people doing fun outdoor things that helps them stay fit and active. But they also work really, really hard to generate lots of charitable income for us, and that is not insignificant values in terms of supporting our service deliver more. Just want to recognise in particular Anthony, who at the moment is aiming to raise £10,000 by virtually walking the Pennine Way. And he's halfway there already, so fantastic. And I just wanted to finish by showing one kind of final piece of analysis that was done by South Central and West. So this is a geospatial analysis, and this looks a little bit complicated, but essentially this is a map, and the coloured area on the map is the catchment area of Harrogate District Trust. The red cross that you can sort of make out in the middle is Harrogate Sports and Fitness Centre, where we run the service. And what I really want to draw your attention to is kind of this light grey area, which our evaluation team have deemed to be the kind of barrier that is within a 30-minute drive time of our base in Harrogate. And what they've shown from their evaluation is that if you live within that light grey area, so within 30-minute drive time, you are significantly more likely to take up the offer of our service. If you live outside that 30-minute barrier, you are significantly less likely to take up the offer of service. And I think we're probably all familiar with the Harrogate District Trust values, one of which is equality. And I guess this has got us thinking. So we know we can improve the fitness of patients, the strength of patients. We know that that has beneficial effects, meaning they might not have to come back to hospital after having cancer treatment. We know that patients love the service and enjoy coming to the service. But we also now know that if you live more than 30 minutes away, it's really difficult to get here. So one of the big recommendations of this evaluation piece of work is that actually, if we could open a second site, potentially up in Ripon, where this yellow cross is, that would hugely increase the number of patients that fell within that 30-minute kind of drive time radius of the service. And that's really what we're looking and hoping to do over the next year or two. So with that thought, I'd just like to thank you, and we'll stop there, but happy to take any questions.
From Harrogate Hospital.
Yeah.
So really, would it only be the Harrogate patients that we could offer this to discuss?
Yeah, so we work into the catchment area of Harrogate District Trust.
So it's like,
So
as far as sort of the Ripon community goes, and
yeah.
Nidderdale and all of that within that.
Yeah, that would fall within it. But yes, the York side would start to get closer to York.
And the same things.
Yeah, that's us. So we take Wetherby patients.
It's within our catchment.
Yeah.
Even if they've got an LS postcode, they would still come.
Yeah. So a lot of our kind of cancer 288 referrals come from practices, GP practices in Wetherby. So we still take those.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions on Teams? No.
Anyone on Teams?
To ask me this morning, and she would struggle to come to the site to have some exercise done. Would it be beneficial to refer her and maybe let her have a one-to-one with you and see what you can offer so that she can exercise from home?
So I think so. I see almost, well, a good 50% of the bowel cancer patients as well as part of their risk evaluation for surgery. And I try and say to everyone, and if nothing else, please try and come to the one-on-one assessment, because at that point there, firstly, the barrier of just getting there is gone. And secondly, they can see what's on offer. But for those patients who genuinely can't make it to the sports and fitness centre, which for some they can't, there is a whole range of other things we can offer. So we can offer exercise programs that patients can follow at home and advice on things they can be doing. So there are home-based solutions for patients who can't make it in. But the other barrier is patients who say, I don't really think it's for me. And for those patients, I also try and say to them, just come to the one-on-one. It's free. It does cost nothing, but come to that. Because, for example, just you know, not infrequently have patients who say, well, look, I'm already fit. You know, I cycle regularly. I'm a triathlete. I know how to exercise. And to which I'd say that's great. And you may not need us, but have you ever done a sit-up when you've had a midline incision? Have you ever ridden on your bike when you've had a radical prostatectomy? You know, do you know how to deal with some of the side effects of chemotherapy, and do you know what symptoms to be worrying about in the post-operative period and not be worrying about in the post-operative period? Which things should, which things, and all those things. There's lots of things that I think that sort of unknowns to patients. So if I can get them into that, first appointment and break that barrier, then I think it's quickly realised there is something for everyone, even if it's a home-based solution.
What's the best way to refer to you?
So the referral form is in WebV. So if you just search Active Against Cancer, it should pop up as a document in WebV, and then you can fill it in and send it that way. Yeah,
we've already talked about this in the room, but for anyone online as well, we do have patients now who prior to their prehabilitation would not have been candidates for surgery and had previously been turned down for surgery, which would have left them basically for palliative routes, who are now going through a period of prehabilitation, and then that decision-making process is made. And we have an example of someone from today on the high dependency who's just had bowel cancer surgery, who about 8 weeks ago would have been a no for surgery, and after 6 weeks of prehabilitation has now had successful bowel cancer surgery. So, what we've tried to do is demonstrate that there is real science for what we've done, but the service that we actually try to run hides that in some ways in what is otherwise a fun, social, engaging thing to do. But there is actually real, genuine benefit to what we do, and it can change. So we do want the exercise at sort of a corporate level to be considered a prescription. It's that serious, but for the patients, we want it to be super fun, engaging, and sort of lifelong changing thing.
Information that I could give to the patient. So give them information when we find the cancers at colonoscopies, and then what happens next. It might be quite useful to give them a bit of something.
Yeah.
At that point, where can we get that from?
So we can get that to you. So we've got leaflets and kind of flyers and posters and things, and they.
A lot of them, they feel like they're not then doing anything, they're left in this limbo, but then at least they can be looking into that, so they feel they're being a bit proactive.
So we'll get that to you, and there's also a website with a whole full information as well. So the Active Against Cancer, if they it's on there. If they just, and they can, like I say, they can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram, and but the website there's full of information as well, including videos of things you can do at home. And I mean, we haven't gone into some of the aspects of delivery of exercise, but probably sort of two key pieces of information is that some of the greatest gains in exercise are in those who go from very, very little or no exercise to doing some, get the greatest benefits, and then actually to become fitter and fitter and fitter, then becomes more and more marginal. It's put a lot of effort in to get that, but that early gain is there. And then the other great kind of bit of science with it is that you can get a lot of the gains by doing very short, easy bursts of exercise. So, for example, using the stairs and not a lift. There's really simple things that people can do that actually have tremendous health benefits, and doing them in short, manageable chunks. And it's kind of been coined exercise snacking, but you can exercise snack through a day. And what you're really doing is trying to break up sedentary periods. And as I tried to show at the beginning of the talk, it's sedentary time that is a killer. We are not designed to be sedentary. We're designed to be up and active almost all day, and then sleep at night, and then go again. That's how the body's designed. And sedentary periods is a modern phenomenon that didn't exist until the last sort of 30, 40 years.